I'm excited to meet this guy. I think we saw a video of him during the break session. But next up, we have Kareem Weaver. He's going to talk about curricula and accountability. So Mr. Kareem comes from Oakland, California. I love Oakland, by the way. It's like, I call it my second home because it reminds me of Portland, but a lot more of us. But anyway, he is a former administrator and teacher and is currently a member of the Oakland NAACP Education Committee and is a leader of the Full and Complete Reading is a Universal Mandate. And he's going to tell us all about that. So take it away, Mr. Weaver.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. Glad to be with everybody today, coming from sunny Oakland, California. Just glad to be here, glad to participate in the March Literacy event. During the break, there was a video played. That was my nephew, formerly my niece. And I was the interviewer and he was the interviewee. And he's had quite a journey, I have to say. And they asked, could they share that? And I said, sure. I do a lot of those little videos and interviews to give people the reality of what goes on in people's lives when we're talking about literacy. It's not a game, or it's not some political football. This is real people with their lives impacting them as individuals, families, communities, etc. So with that being said, I'm gonna jump in. So I appreciated the last presenter's work. I thought that was very, very important information. And I'm gonna try to build off that. As you were talking, I tweaked some things in my mind so we wouldn't duplicate things. And I thought maybe I could draw some out a little bit more. And I know that there are some educators on the line, both parent educators and school-based educators. So I wanted to focus my remarks on for them. And I've been asked to present on curriculum and accountability. So I think from that lens, I have to start with kind of level setting things with curriculum, because if our curriculum was designed to support the greatest number of kids possible, our kids would be reading. If there was accountability in the sector that said, hey, kids aren't reading using this, we're not going to use this anymore. Well, guess what? We wouldn't be using things that don't work. But being as though those two things are not happening, then I think it behooves us all to just kind of step back and understand why not. Why don't we have things that match up with the needs of our students? What are the needs of our students? So I just wanted to level set that, and hopefully this this little time I have with you all today will be fruitful. I'm going to share my screen and sound. Okay, so the first place I want to start is here. This is the website for the American Federation of Teachers, also known as AFT. I believe Randy Weingarten is the president of AFT. They've been saying this for years. Everything we're talking about today, you can go on AFT's website and look at it. So when they're talking about what makes a strong reading program, they don't mince words. They say it has to be aligned with the research consensus. When you say the science of reading, that's what we're talking about. Because this is settled in terms of the research. It's overwhelming. It's a consensus. So you might hear different phrases or terminology used: science of reading, structured literacy, research-based, evidence-based. It's the same thing. It's the stuff that we know works for the greatest number of kids. And as the last presenter said, it should be explicit, systematic, core classroom instruction. And that's key. This means not necessarily in the room down the hall where you get pulled out if you're not reading well, but in core classroom instruction, these things should be happening. These are those 5 pillars she mentioned right there. And that aligns with the presentation, but also the materials, the assessments, you can go on their website and check it out. Now, let me get to my spiel for today, and I'll try to be as efficient as possible. By the way, you can take my email. Feel free to email me. I look forward to engaging on this topic. So you remember this. She gave this graph, these 5 pillars. Absolutely accurate. This is the ideal. This is the wonderland. Everyone says, yeah, we need this stuff. And of course, we need writing and oral language development and that type of stuff. But you gotta have this stuff in whatever you're doing to get the greatest number of kids reading. It's not a pendulum swing or anything like that. This is settled science. You have to know this. And actually, they've done MRIs in the brains of kindergartners, and when phonemic awareness happens, or when you start to match sounds with letters or representation of those sounds, different parts of your brain get more oxygen. You're literally turning the lights on in kids' brains, so to speak. Unfortunately, in our schools across the country, this hasn't been really what we've been doing. We've kind of been doing this. And we call it balance, but oftentimes it's not balanced at all, as people have different interpretations of what kids need. This is a national survey, thousands and thousands of teachers surveyed about what they perceive what's called balanced literacy to be. So this is what teachers believe it to be, not necessarily what they're doing. So if I have this belief, it doesn't mean that I'm doing each of these things, but this is at a best case scenario, according to our beliefs. If everyone's operating along those lines, this is what we're going to get. So there's a need for some shifting, and she put forth this graphic. It was about structured literacy and how a certain number of kids are dyslexic. So I wanted to take this, don't focus too much on this, and I wanted to synthesize. I wanted to make sure that everybody gets it and take that and build it into my presentation today. And so this can be represented like this. And this is what I want us to focus on today. All right, you got some kids, really, they don't really need us. About 5%, like I said, they can teach us. And then, you see the numbers there. And in that 25 to 35 and that 5%, that's where we're at. Our curriculum is designed to reach these kids, and I'll explain why a little bit later. Our training, university levels, our philosophies of education, our pedagogy, our systems, our methodologies, everything is designed for these kids. If you have a child who, by the way, would be in the majority, who actually needs it in a structured, explicit, direct way, you're out of luck. It's not set up for you. It's set up for these. These are the privileged within our system. And then you have a small little band of folks, right? Well, I wouldn't say small, about 10 to 15%, that's not small. I mean, that's of the entire population. And understanding that these folks here, absolutely brilliant, neurocognitive, and it's a continuum, and dyslexia is a continuum. They process things neurologically a little differently than others, with great promise, great potential, but they absolutely have to have it. There's no doubt about it. They've got to have it structured. It's got to be explicit, direct, and consistently taught, explicitly taught. And there needs to be some diagnostic work done as well. So as the frame, let's get into it. So I took that chart and I just collapsed these last two sections, the yellow and the blue. I just put them together because really I call the blue squad, the privileged within our education system. And most of us probably on this call are bluesies, meaning the curriculum is designed for you. The universities cater to you. They teach people what you need to learn. The publishers cater to you. These are the folks. So you got the blue side, and I hate to be so binary about it, but I collapsed them down like that because I want to make it as plain as possible. And I don't know how else to be at this point. I want to be as explicit as it can be. These curricula that are popular across the country are designed for the folks in blue. They are the most popular curricula in the country right now. But the things they do and the way they teach, what they emphasize and how they're structured really does privilege these individuals for a host of reasons. I'll get into that a little bit later. Now, does that say a kid in orange can't learn using units of study or wonders? No, it's not saying that, but it's saying the design element of it is to focus on certain skills that it's not being taught explicitly, directly, systematically in terms of those core foundational elements, or there are pieces missing. And sometimes districts have no set curriculum. Literally, I've seen it. Or there's an inadequate foundational skills piece, and they pick that. Or what's popular now is the mix and match. Well, we'll do this program and then let's say benchmark. We'll do benchmark advanced, and then we'll take the skills block from another program and kind of mix it together. And that's what we'll do to help the oranges. We'll get a skills block. We know the skills block's not that great, this program, but we'll get another one like SIPs or something else, and we'll put it in there, and that'll do it. In our universities. So our universities, we've spoken to universities with the NAACP, we've sat down with deans of education programs, and they're completely disconnected by and large from the impact they're having on students, on K-12 students. And that's a problem. They're emphasizing philosophy or proficiencies, and frankly, dyslexia isn't really covered too much. And the blues, the folks who, oh, you know what, I should change that. It's minimal prep for the oranges, not the blues. If you're an orange person, they're not really preparing you to be served very well. And then the publishers cater to the blue folks. They cater to those who can use it in different kinds of ways and learn in a variety of modalities. And the decision makers often come from this group. Publishers have told me that it's our job to produce MVP products. I had a whistleblower tell me this, MVP products, meaning minimally viable products, something that we can sell. We have to make it so the blue folks, you know, that it's what they need. They're the customer. The customer's always right. And to the orange folks, MVP products. And then as tangled as that seems, and I know this is not probably the most fun topic, but it just is what it is. On top of that, as a system, when we look at the results of our students across the country and the proficiency rates on NAEP and other local and state assessments, we begin, you have to justify, because this has been going on for generations. And the ideologies that come up are things such as, you know, the 40% must work harder. In fact, let me just list some of the ideologies right here. So these are some of the common things that come up to distract from the fact that we're really not sure how to teach these orange folks on the ground. If we're not, then this often comes up. Poverty, need more time. Now, I understand these things are real. I understand poverty is a real thing. I get it. Trauma and culture, I get trauma is real. But I got news for you. African-American student, we're talking about Black literacy, right? That's the summit. So Black students have always been traumatized in the United States. You Google 4 little girls, you Google whatever you want to. At what generation was it less? Just because we have iPhones now and see it on CNN doesn't mean trauma just started. This has been going on for generations after generations, but they've been able to read. We've been able to learn. And so these philosophies have cropped up, or they say, well, that kid's just not college mature, or college isn't for everyone. And then I hate to be so unrefined, but sometimes people, I mean, they're just dumb. They're not as smart. So we're going to have special classes and special this and special that, because they're the others. They're the ones that are having a hard time. And so let's either just give them more time, maybe they just need more time, or we use more refined language in education. Developmentally delayed. We can say, you know, there's a deficit of something. You know, we can spin it different ways. But what we're really saying is, it's on them. Now, this is, I think, the heart of the matter. That's our population. That's just across demographics. I don't care if you're Black, white, brown, doesn't matter. This is human beings. Those two categories, yellow and blue, are collapsed to blue. But this is who we are in the country. The challenge is, according to the Right to Read Project, they surveyed almost 3,000 educators. This is who our educators are. Now, I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to deduce what the implications of this are. Who's choosing the curriculum? Who is in leadership? Who's a superintendent? Who's a chief academic officer? If you had a chief academic officer from the orange group, I guarantee you they're not picking Lucy Carter. If you have a superintendent from, if you have, you know, if this was inverted, if the orange folk, if we had a more equitable distribution of neurocognitive abilities and profiles, then a lot of our issues would go away. But the folks in blue oftentimes cannot even conceive of a world where the orange folks live in. What's wrong with them? So what might, given this, and I'm really thankful for the Right to Read project. We've been collecting similar data ourselves, but their number was so large, like let's use theirs instead. Ours was just about the same. It was even higher, like 87%, same thing. Oh, and then you have our dyslexics. So the folks in blue, they're not even thinking about those kids. That's like we don't even get there. So let's hear. So if you can imagine, use your mind's eye or your mind's ear. What? There's no one way to teach reading. Just red writing down there. I love Lucy. Folks who say I love Lucy. I love this one. Orange readers matter. No, all readers matter. You haven't helped me with this squiggly line, but I'm gonna keep on moving. I want to introduce someone to you. Dr. Keon Anderson is in Long Beach, California. Had the opportunity to meet him just a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact. And he's spoken at the White House. He's done amazing things worldwide. And he, well, you see his profile there. Very accomplished business owner, doctorate in ed leadership, a couple of degrees from Long Beach. He works in the school or with the school system, but he also, is a college peer advisor. He has done phenomenal work in his young life. And in 9th grade, he was reading the 2nd grade level. So I want you to hear from someone. I want you to hear from him just for a couple of minutes. I hope you don't mind. I just want you to hear his 2 minutes of his story so you can get a sense of the disconnect and what might be important when we're looking at curriculum and accountability.
So in K through 8, I received messages about me being unintelligent. I knew because I had been assessed that there was something wrong and that my brain did not necessarily work like everyone else's. But before 9th grade, I'd never had anybody sit me down and really explain, this is what dyslexia means. This is why you process things the way that you process them. These are the specific gaps that you have in order for me to be able to work on those things. So when I got to 9th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Obiagu, and she utilized the Linda Mubel program, which is pretty much like a decoding system, where we're taking it down to basic phonetic sounds, sight words, and those sorts of things. In addition to teaching me those basic skills, she really connected me to literature that I could identify with. When I got to high school, I was reading at a 2nd to 3rd grade reading level. I met Miss O. She helped me develop those basic skills, and within a year time frame, I was reading at about grade level. So going from reading at a 2nd grade reading level to almost being like 9th to 10th grade. By the time that I went to my 2nd year of high school, I was taking honors and AP classes, and by my junior year, I'd even taken some community college classes and landed an internship. Now, I know that my story, it's sort of an extreme story of growth over a very short period of time. But one of the things that I'm aware of is that those basic decoding skills are beneficial for all students.
We'll be having a longer conversation with Dr. Anderson this coming Thursday, March 18th. The NAACP will be hosting a literacy town hall. You see the link there. You're welcome to join. You could register at that site. But I wanted to put a real life face on what we're talking about. There are a lot of Dr. Andersons in our classrooms who aren't getting what they need, because when you're in the orange, when you need things structured, explicit, systematic, and direct, oftentimes you are made to feel less intelligent. You have kids with their hood on in the back of the class. You have students who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder in terms of their experience and how it impacts them emotionally. And we're losing a lot of our Dr. Andersons, Black, white, male, female, Latino, everyone across the board. And so I wanted to put a real person in front of you to illuminate what's at stake. So now really quickly, accountability. So how is this possible? Well, our universities who are training our educators, our principals, our teachers, our coaches, everyone, they have very mixed beliefs about how to teach reading. I've sat in rooms with faculty and the dean and the faculty debated right in front of me about which way was the right way. Some pounded the table to say, teach the science of reading, while others said, you know what, we need to do a more holistic approach, and they need to experience the language and focus on the love of reading. As if kids don't love reading when they're good at it and they can choose something that they enjoy. Secondly, our K-12 school system and leadership is completely blue. Our publishers are completely. So the accountability comes from this. We're calling on the dyslexic community and the civil rights community. There has to be a coalition of the willing. You don't have to be a dyslexic or have one in your family or whatever. You could just be a person of goodwill who understands I need to find out what the science of reading is and make sure my practices are designed to reach the largest number of students. In the civil rights community, I believe, and this is why, as a member of the education committee for the Oakland NAACP, we've really focused on literacy, on reading, writing, and also supporting kids with dyslexia. They're like the canaries in the coal mine. If they're okay, everyone will be okay. So these folks are empowered for a couple of reasons. The civil rights community kind of carries the moral gravitas in this area. And the dyslexic community is backed by some federal laws and statutes. Our kids are guaranteed a free and appropriate public education. And so what's appropriate for those students? They can advocate for that because what's good for them is good for all. So here we are. The accountability has to come from community. It has to come from the civil rights community. It has to come from those who are empowered, engaged, whether they be in the dyslexic community or just educators or parents or people of goodwill who say enough is enough. We must have curriculum that has evidence of success for students. It must be designed to reach the greatest number of students. How do you know it's designed right there? Well, you judge a tree by the fruit it bears. What are the results? What are the outcomes? How are students doing? How are Black and brown students doing? How are students who speak a second language doing? How are kids with dyslexia doing? Ask those questions. Publishers have told me, CEOs of publishers have told me, no one asks these questions. No one asks for results. You're the first person, Kareem, who's ever asked for results. We've spoken to seven different publishers or curriculum companies. They've all said the same thing. You're the first person that's asked this. The community has to demand it. Show us the evidence that this works. Show us. And I'm not talking about just 1 year, 2, 3, 4 years. Has this helped close the achievement gap? Is it usable? Do teachers is the learning curve appropriate? Can it fully be implemented within the bounds of the teacher's contract? Things like that. Just ask those core questions to spark accountability amongst the staff and the board at your local school system. And the civil rights community has got to partner with these groups and take the lead and say, listen, this is a civil rights issue of our time. The NAACP in 2014 wrote a national resolution on dyslexia. The state of California and Hawaii together, their state conferences put forth a resolution for dyslexia in 2019. So the civil rights community is stepping up, but there needs to be deep partnership to make sure that all kids get equitable access to high quality instruction. Because like Dr. Anderson said, these things are good for all students. It's not a niche, it's not a small group, and it's not a color. Many people have the resources, let me stop sharing my screen. Many folks have the resources to then support students, to put them to Linda Mood Bell, as he said, or some other program, and then we think that they didn't have an issue to begin with. That's not the case. Resources alone should not determine your access to being able to read, nor should it determine your access to a free and appropriate public education. So that's what I have on curriculum and accountability, and I'm happy also to stay around and talk with folks afterwards.